Bom dia e bem-vindo para mais um episódio do Mundo da Transição Energética. Hoje, como vocês podem ver, estamos num lugar muito especial, aqui no Rio de Janeiro, com uma vista bonita que eu organizei hoje, também para receber uma pessoa muito especial. Daqui a pouco eu vou falar um pouco mais sobre ele. Esse é o Rio de Janeiro, a primeira vez que a gente está aqui no Rio de Janeiro, e eu acho que vai ser realmente um episódio muito interessante. Hoje conosco o meu amigo e contemporâneo, o Timo Bollerhey, da H2Global ou da HINTCO. Na verdade, da HINTCO, mas no programa H2Global é tudo junto. Daqui a pouco a gente vai esclarecer isso um pouco mais. Bem-vindo, Timo. E só para avisar, daqui a pouco, nós vamos mudar essa entrevista para inglês. Nós vamos falar inglês, em homenagem ao Timo. Eu acho que a conversa vai fluir melhor, apesar o Timo já morou 1 ano e meio aqui no Brasil, mas eu acho que em inglês fica melhor para todos nós entendermos, e aí vocês também podem entender, mas podem ficar tranquilos, porque nós vamos depois colocar sublegenda, e aí cada um pode acompanhar. Okay, so let's switch to English. Once again, a very warm welcome, Timo.
Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome, and it's really a great pleasure to have you here. I know it's a really tough time for you. Currently, you were yesterday, you already went to Chile, and yesterday you had a roadshow in Sao Paulo.
Exactly.
Today in Rio, and tomorrow you go to Colombia, and then to other places.
Mexico, Houston.
Mexico,
yes.
Houston. So very, very thankful that you are here. And I can tell you, it was only able to have him here because I promised him, let's have this interview with a really great view. So I had to attract him to Rio to have this interview. And so really happy to have you here. Before starting, I would like to have to make a little, perhaps a little disclaimer or something like that. I know that there might be perhaps a lot of people who think about, oh no, now I will get more detailed about the H2Global, about the second bit and what's behind this. This is not the objective of this interview of this what we are currently doing. First of all, the objective of our program is always to know a little bit more about the people behind the scene, about the people and the companies behind the scene, and not discuss in so much detail about some specific and so on. And secondly, this is a public bid. Timo is somehow linked to the German government, which is supported by the German government in some cases. So it has also to be a little bit carefully what to talk. It has to be public to everybody, so that everybody has, when they're going to the bid, everybody has the same basis and the same information. So we will talk about more about Timo, about his life, and we want to know a little bit how H2Global was created. And you will know that Brazil has a very important role on this creation. And this we would like to discover a little bit more. Okay?
Perfect.
So Timo, let's start. Let's relax and enjoy the interview a little bit. So Timo, normally we are starting to read a bit about the curriculum, where the people is coming from, what were his stations all along his career path. But perhaps we can split it a little bit, and during the conversation have this explored a little bit more. If something missing, you can always tell us something. But what caught my attention when I was reading yesterday a little bit, I spied a little bit into your LinkedIn profile. I saw that, or everybody thinks perhaps that you are an economist or something, right? But I saw that you studied geography and geology.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, quite interesting because how a geography and a geology could create such an important program, which is definitely linked to finance, to economy, and so on. So uh, tell us a little bit why you just studied geography and where does your path goes until economics, perhaps going through Africa or something like that. I know you had just your first experience also in Africa. Tell us a little bit about your early life.
I mean, Africa was always a very important part of my life and still is actually. So Latin America came relatively late to the picture, very important now as well. You said it already, Brazil also for HINTCO is important. Yesterday when we had the roadshow in Sao Paulo, I said it's so nice to bring sort of HINTCO back to where it all started. Maybe we talk about that later. But yeah, my career has always been a little bit of disruption. Actually, I was always in love with nature, especially with Africa. I partly grew up in South Africa. And when I was 13 was my first time. When I was a little bit older, when I came back to South Africa, to Botswana, to Zimbabwe, was out in the nature in the Kalahari Desert. And I just said, okay, that changed my life. And I said, I want to come back. So Africa, also when I went to school, and then when I was 16, I was going to South Africa for a year, traveling a lot there. And that's also when it grew sort of my attention towards geography and to understand, the nature, the scientific base behind that. And my initial start was actually studying geography and going into the development corporation. Then I started a collaboration that day with the GIZ. You probably know that very well. It's the German Development Corporation in Namibia there. Also did a lot of research together with the GIZ and also with research institutes. And then I got very frustrated because I thought, okay, this is, I don't know, we need to draw the bigger wheels here. It's very nice what you do there, but it's only little, tiny little things. You change maybe the lives of one or two, but you're not changing the system. You're not changing sort of what is really needed to bring a transformational change here. And then I got really frustrated because I thought I'd going into research. I had the research, working for the research side for a while. I thought, hey, this is also frustrating. Then I went into development corporation, also frustrating. And then I was a little bit clueless. And then I thought I'd go into advisory, actually into consulting, was considering to join McKinsey or BCG. And but I was very active in terms of collaborating or doing conferences on Africa as a student. And I had a bank as a sponsor. And the bank then asked me, would you like to join us? I say, guys, I'm not a banker. I can't do maths. I'm not interested in banking. Forget about it. But they said, yeah, but we need somebody like you because you know Africa and we're looking for somebody for Africa. And because I was a little bit clueless what to do, I thought the guys were nice. They offered me a job in Africa, so I'm going to go for it. So this is how I got into finance, into banking. And I think maybe also to how does that feed maybe to some of the things, because with geography is also sort of a field where you have lots of different elements coming together. So as a geographer, you're not a specialist in anything, but you take the bigger picture. And that sometimes really helps. And maybe that's also something that contributed to the development of the things that I did later, because you take the bigger picture and you're tying the knots together. And maybe that is something that also helps to putting up, developing the H2Global model, to think a little bit outside the boxes that sometimes the specialists always do. Maybe that's a little bit the story behind there.
Okay. Well, we can say now you really found the big wheel to do. Just not only today, you are not only putting the small wheels together, but now you really with H2Global, you found your big wheel. No?
Exactly.
And then in 2019, I think you came to Brazil.
Exactly.
You left Africa and then you joined the GIZ, which is the German Corporation for International Work Together.
Yeah.
Somehow like that, and they sent you to Brazil. Was it a choice from you, or was it more or less a how does it come?
That was a clear choice because I had connections already to to my now partner, Marcus Exenberg. I was working in Brazil for GIZ. And he also asked me a couple of years earlier to develop some concepts for, let's say, how to mobilize private capital and do sort of what we call blended finance, how we merge sort of concessional funding, public funding with private capital. And I developed the concept for that, for energy savings there actually. And a couple of years later, I was then moved with my family to West Africa, to Cote d'Ivoire. It was a family experience that we wanted to start there, but the climate, the conditions weren't really sort of what we were looking for. And then Marcus called me and said, listen, if you're unhappy in Cote d'Ivoire, why don't you come to Latin America, to Brazil? We thought, okay, that's something completely new. We've never been to Latin America. I've been a couple of times to Brazil before, but not really traveling a lot in Latin America. So we thought we're going to go for that. And then we moved to Brasilia. First, to be honest, a little bit skeptic. Is that a city that we would like? And we really fell in love with Brazil and Brasilia. And it was one of the biggest sacrifices that we actually brought for H2Global to move back and leave Brazil, because we really felt so happy here. Unfortunately, COVID came then, so we were a little bit restricted with traveling. We love traveling, and but we really enjoyed the time that we had here.
And that's, as you said, you spent mostly the whole Corona time in Brasilia in the lockdown. I remember that when we met there.
Yeah.
More or less, I was locked down here in Rio, and you locked down, and we had this contact via the GIZ calls,
Exactly.
seeing what to do. Should we go back to Germany? Should we stay? It was a very difficult time. But then you came, and I think, and then you decided to go back because you had already developed or started to develop the H2Global concept. But before going to that part, I think there's a very interesting, I think it's very interesting, and probably you also think, because when you decided to move back, you bought a Volkswagen Kombi here in Brazil, and you put it in a container and took it back to Germany. Tell us a little bit about the story. I saw it once. You showed me a photo. Very nice, a very old one. A thing that you only can find here in Brazil. In Germany, you will find not anymore. Is it still alive? Is it still you're still taking care of him, or how does it?
Very much. Very much.
Where does it come from? This idea to have a Volkswagen Kombi,
It was
the old one.
it was always my dream, but unfortunately, these old combis in Germany are, at least for me, completely unaffordable. And my father, it goes back to my father, because my father in the 60s, he drove a Kombi from Cape Town back to Germany, and he sold it. And that's also a little bit where my Africa sort of spirit comes from. And I always, was really unhappy. So why did you sell this beautiful car? Why didn't you keep it? I would have loved to, inherit this car. And when we moved to Brazil, I saw, there are combis. They were built a little bit longer here than in Germany. And there's still a lot of the combis sort of alive and kicking. And compared, at least to the German, it's affordable. So we bought the Kombi and got it rebuilt also here in Brazil. And now in Germany, in Europe, we use it for traveling. We travel to Sweden, to Norway, over the Alps into Italy, the Tuscany. And it's always a great happening when you drive with that Kombi through the villages. Everybody is waving and sending hearts, and it's amazing. If you have a breakdown, it's amazing. You get invited for. They serve you with food. They invite you for weddings. It's amazing. Everybody is falling in love with that Kombi, and I think it's the best way to get to know people. And my aim is still to travel maybe 2-3 months through Europe with it, because I think with every breakdown you will make new friends, and I think that's a great way of traveling.
Yeah, and the good thing, you can fix everything by yourself, or you can fix it at least. It's not just a black box. It's
I would say people can fix. I can't. I've got two left hands when it comes to mechanics. But yeah, so you can always fix it.
Okay, no, that's a very. I thought it's a very interesting story, and knowing that it came from your father, going from Africa, South Africa, just to Europe,
from Cape Town to Kassel in Germany. Yes.
Cape Town to Kassel, very nice. No? But let's talk a little bit about H2Global. You mentioned this already yesterday in your opener from the roadshow, that it was created already in Brazil. And H2Global is now more or less really a global program adopted, or it's already a lot of countries are interested to use the same mechanism, which you created together with Markus Exenberger. And where did the idea came from, and where does it? How did it was born, more or less?
It was born actually. First of all, when I was in Brazil, we already saw the great opportunity from a Brazilian perspective, what hydrogen might bring across. Fertilizer being, I don't know, 95% being imported. Brazil has got the huge opportunity to produce green fertilizers at large scale, and could not only stop the imports, but become a net exporter of those products. So that's how the initial sort of concepts around how could we create that sort of or realize that opportunity in Brazil. But it was actually a project in Morocco that caught my attention, was the trigger for H2Global, because I was asked by the German government, by BMZ, the Ministry for Collaboration. They were supporting with sort of traditional capex oriented instruments, a project in Morocco, hydrogen project. And they asked me, because I was many years in asset management, to bring in the institutional investors into their project. And I had a really serious debate with BMZ there. And we really got a little bit sort of cross there, because I said, listen guys, you won't get any institutional investors here. There's no business case. There's no real market. Forget about it. You will only get sort of concessional funding in there, but you won't find any institutional private capital going there. And it actually turned out to be exactly what I predicted. But then after that sort of argument that I had with BMZ, and I was a bit angry because they were really, no, it's not going to work. And I said, no, I don't believe it. I thought, okay, it's easy criticizing that the instruments are not right, but what would you do to create that market and not only bring projects to fruition, but really create a functioning market, which then will allow and enable institutional capital at scale to go into that market and to fund that transition that we read. And that is when I thought, okay, what is required? You need offtake. This is on hydrogen, the biggest missing link: offtake. You need long-term offtake. You need an off-taker that is paying the price that is currently needed, because there's a big gap. Classical chicken and egg situation. Production costs are still significantly higher than what the market might be willing to pay, because we actually don't know, because nobody's buying it. And with that situation, nobody's starting to produce. Without any offerings in the market, nobody's starting to buy it. And how do you overcome that chicken and egg situation? So we need an off-taker that is providing long-term offtake. The idea was to introduce what we call the intermediary. This is what we call HINTCO, the Hydrogen Intermediary Company. And HINTCO is like a trader. Always call it a very stupid and lazy trader, because HINTCO most likely buys the product at a higher price than it's able to sell it into the market. And that cost of difference, that is being compensated for by a government. And we're selling short-term, long-term we're buying, short-term we're selling, because we want to create liquidity into the markets and creating pricing signals. And these are exactly the elements that are missing for a functioning market. So this is how we bring projects to fruition, but also try to create a market. And that was actually the H2Global idea, to introduce such kind of an intermediary. We called it a double auction model. We do an auction on the supply and an auction on the demand side. And that was the idea. And then I discussed that idea actually with one or two people, and they always told me, oh, forget about it. That's not going to work. So I put it back into the cupboard. And then 3 months later, I was there sort of in COVID exile when, the beds on the intensive care units in Brazil got really scarce. So we went back for a couple of weeks back to Germany. And that was when the German government announced its hydrogen strategy. And it announced a week later, it got the COVID-19 stimulus package, where a couple of billion were made available for the ramp up of hydrogen. And this is where when I called Marcus. So Marcus, my colleague there, so Marcus, you know what they're looking for? They're looking for H2Global. You know that model that I developed there? We should pitch this. And then I was sitting down again there. My wife always says it was under a cherry tree. It was in summer in Germany. I was sitting under that cherry tree in Germany and trying to get an overall model out of that, a pitch deck. And H2Global is more than just HINTCO. It was actually a three-pillar approach where we also look into finance, early stage capital, that we believe venture capital that needs to be raised and triggered into that market. And then also large-scale capital there where the institutional investors come in on a structured a fund model. So that whole concept is what I called H2Global, and this is what we pitched then through GIZ to the ministry, to BMWK in Germany. And then 3 weeks later, we got a call from the ministry who would like to talk to those people who developed that and understand it better, and that's where it all started.
Okay. Well, very, very interesting. And when I saw this concept for the first time, I thought, well, this has already been done in a similar case here in Brazil with the auctions for the electricity market. So I can imagine that you're staying here in Brazil, or you're living in Brazil, and see what's happening on the energy market in Brazil, the electricity auctions a bit. So can we say that this was somehow a little bit a model that you also used, that you had in mind when you created the H2Global concept?
Not really. I wasn't too much focused on the Brazil or too much in knowledge of the market there. I was rather looking at CFD mechanisms that we know, for example, from the UK and other parts of the world, or also in Germany in the electricity markets. CFD meaning contract for difference, where sort of you agree on a reference price, and if the price in the market is above or beyond, either you pay in or you get out. So the government would pay in. And but the issue there is, for a CFD model to work, you need a reference price. I said there is no reference price. So how do this is why we are creating and simulating existing markets with this model on the supply and on the demand side, simulating a CFD, but we are creating our own reference prices here. And we have the same effect in terms of efficiency from the model compared to CFD in terms of a taxpayer's point of view. I don't believe in subsidies, maybe I should say that. I think if there are certain elements in the market creation, market failure situations where you need public support, but I don't believe in public support in the long run. It should be very determined, very specific, and the public should get out of the business as soon as it's no longer needed. And this is also where a CFD mechanism is pretty precise, but it's not applicable here. So this is why we created that intermediary model as well.
Okay. Okay, so then you created the concept. So the first concept, it was the concept was accepted by the German government. They thought it interesting, but there was still a long way to go until the first auction. Let me say this way, we were looking at this H2Global a little bit right from the beginning, and it took time and time and time. And how was the process of getting this a really mature program, not just only a concept, because it's a lot of money involved and a lot of public attention as well involved. How was this process to really come to the first auction at this?
This was also, first of all, we never actually expected or intended to run this also. But the BMWK there then said, okay, please prove this concept, get together with scientists, but especially also with the industry to vet this concept and develop it further so that it could be potentially implemented. So we created working groups together with the industry and together also with the Hydrogen Association in Germany. And then we sort of already involved a lot of lawyers there. Then suddenly the minister in Germany came up with the request. They said, okay, HINTCO should not be state-owned. Initially, I thought HINTCO is a state-owned entity, but they said we will never deal with energy. We never had. We don't do this now, and we never will. Come up with an idea, with a concept where HINTCO is not state-owned, not owned by the industry, but however private, and with a connection to the industry. I said, okay, that's not going to work. And then we came up with the concept of creating a foundation, the H2Global Foundation as a concept, which is non-profit, which is an independent foundation, which means there is no owner. You can't also be a member of that foundation. You can be a donor to it, but nobody owns it. Also not me or Marcus who founded it. It's owned only by itself. But that foundation can own a company. And this is HINTCO. And with that, we managed to get HINTCO completely independent from the government, but also from the industry, because there's a Chinese wall between the foundation. That was one of the biggest concerns also for the industry when we started is, do I exclude myself from participating in HINTCO auctions if I'm a donor to the foundation? No, you're not. This is completely separated. But with that, we managed really to get HINTCO as an independent entity, as an independent platform, which created a lot of, let's say, challenges in the first years, to be very honest. But now we are, reaping the fruits there, because HINTCO is also, maybe talk about that later a little bit, being accepted by other governments. It's not we're not a German government institution, we're independent, and other governments, not only in Europe, but also worldwide, are looking at using HINTCO or sort of imitating and replicating the H2Global model, or even using HINTCO because it's independent. It doesn't belong to the German government or the industry. So that's a big, let's say, advantage now of the concept that we had. And that was also very funny. We got a call, I think it was in March, the year later. We took around half a year. We're doing all these vettings and the concept development. And they got a call in March. It was on I think a Tuesday or Wednesday, and somebody from BMWK, and they said, okay, H2Global is going into Parliament tomorrow. I said, what? Yeah, it's going into Parliament tomorrow. I don't know exactly what, but we'll tell you tomorrow. So we got a call the next morning. Said, okay, it's accepted, 900 million for the next H2Global, for the first H2Global tender, and we want you to do this. So wow, interesting. We feel honored, but suddenly it was really becoming reality that this thing is going to happen, and also that they said, we want you to start and implementing this. So you meet not only me, but also Marcus and the team. And so then we really took a very thorough thought. That meant we have to leave Brazil. That meant we have to start a foundation. We didn't know if that's going to work, if we're going to collect enough money from the industry, because the other deal was HINTCO, the operational costs are covered by the industry. Only the cost for difference are covered by the government. And we didn't know if we get enough support from the industry. But then we said, okay, if it's once in a lifetime that you get such, you create an idea, you're at the right time with the right people, at the right spot. It's things you can't plan.
It's a momentum that you have to use. It's a momentum.
You say, okay, if you're not going to do this, you're going to regret this for the rest of your life. So then we quit jobs and back to Germany, started raising capital for the foundation donations, and then we raised the first, what was it? I think 2 million or something from the industry to start the H2Global Foundation. First, we had to actually start together with some others, Florian Gaia and other colleagues, a company to And we had GFA, another corporation, on board that we created a sort of a joint venture company to start the foundation first before it could become independent. So lots of legal issues that suddenly really make things complicated. The instrument itself is relatively straightforward and simple, but the complication comes the moment you start really doing this and implementing this. But that's how it all started. And then we went back to Germany, started the foundation, and then a couple of months later, created HINTCO. And then we split forces. Marcus is managing the foundation, I'm managing HINTCO. And this is how all started.
All started.
Yeah.
And the first auction already is done. The winner is not a Brazilian company, unfortunately, from our side, but we trust and we know that this was really a very tough competition, but a very a strong competition. And the company is an Egypt company, right, who is now producing or will produce ammonia, green ammonia, in Egypt, and then transport this to Germany. Can you tell us now that everything, the first auction now finalized, how many bids did you receive? How many offers did you receive? And how was the process about all these to decide who is the final winner?
I think I can't recall really the number of bids. That's all in the documents that we also published when we did the publication of the first results last year. But our intention was always, well, first of all, we were really positively surprised that it's not only specific regions that one might have expected that would be bidding. It was really globally diversified. So that was really a very positive sign. We initially, but this is also for those maybe interested in participating in the next tender, this is looking back now. We got different conditions for the upcoming tender. So if you're interested there, go on HINTCO's website, download the documents and the PPTs that we have there. But we only wanted to negotiate with maximum five bidders. So we, out of the bids that we have, I'm not sure with 20 or 30, we selected 5 according to a very transparent process. And with these 5 bidders, we went into the actual negotiation phase. And that was very intense because you can imagine we really had like in the morning 2 hours with bidder A, in the afternoon 2 hours with bidder B, that for 2 days. And then we were reviewing the input and then providing feedback, and the next week the same. So this was really very intense because you have to imagine this is really a very nascent industry in a very nascent market. Initially, I thought it's easy. You go to one of the best law firms in the gas industry, for example, because we thought that might be the most likely and clear and the next proxy in terms of documentation and contracts. We just do some changes left and right, and then this will be the contract. No, this is really such a nascent and new industry. This is really something you start from complete scratch. Greenfield. Really on a green field, and it's a sort of a learning curve for the producers, but also for off-takers and even for the lawyers. This was really a very steep learning curve that you can't just place a contract there and say get a sign here. This is something you need to develop together. So this is also why we call it the HPA, the Hydrogen Purchase Agreement, that we in the beginning of the first tender launched and published. It's very different. For example, if you compare the first document to the document that we published now for the second round, where you can see sort of the development and the learning curve. And this is also the idea of H2Global to provide that learning curve also to the market, because this is extremely valuable. It's not, people always believe this is just a shift from a gray molecule to a green molecule. And this is very easy to do and smooth. And this is really a complex transformation that we see there. We also see that it takes longer, that it's more complex, it's more expensive than people expected. A lot of, when you look at the publications, 21, 22, with the euphoric, we get hydrogen less than $1 a kilo by 2030, and we're going to see millions of tons of ammonia being produced already in 25, and all this appeared to be not true. It takes longer because it's a difference between doing or signing MOUs, what we see a lot that happened in the last years, of publishing theoretical papers on where do we believe prices will be and logistic chains will be to be developed. But here this is a complex industry that needs to be developed. Also the logistics have to be developed. The infrastructure needs to be developed. All these chains need to come together to function. And this is something where instruments like H2Global are crucial to provide sort of the first steps towards that direction, so that once the basis is being created, the market really can take over.
I think this is a very important statement, which you did, because we both were in this since at the beginning, since 2020, when starts all these hydrogen hype, everybody was talking about it. As you mentioned, it was at the beginning, everybody was euphoric and launched a lot of MOUs, and everybody was expecting 2026, 27, we will, everybody will use green hydrogen and whatever. And what we see now, when we are now in 2025, today here, we see that there's a certain drawback, there's a certain reality crash somehow, and some people are perhaps getting a little bit dismotivated about it. But it's not coming, and it's all a lie, and whatever it's going, because the projects takes time, and what you saw or what you said is really that to set up a new industry, and it is more or less a new industry, this takes time. It's just not only changing the molecules from gray to green. It's a lot of other things behind that needs to be fixed, that needs to be discussed. And I think this is also a benefit to have H2Global, because you are doing this pioneering work. You are setting up the rules, more or less, that on the other side, off-takers can take this as a model, this HPA, this contract, at the end can take and can use it for themselves.
Exactly.
Because all these other stuff, all these details in the contracts, they were already discussed and they are there, and it can be used. So it takes time, but it will come.
Yeah.
And I think this is the message that we never need to forget.
I think it's very important. I was always very skeptic, also like 2-3 years ago when the hype was there. For example, we had meetings also in Germany with the ministry and the minister himself, who said, okay, why you coming here, with this H2Global concept and idea? I've just seen, big guys, I don't want to say any names here, but they're coming in every day, signing MOUs here. The market is ready, the market is there. Why do we need sort of such a model and a subsidy here? But we said, but this is an MOU. This is not a firm contract. And there's a huge gap between an MOU and a contract, and a lot of way to go. And I think it's healthy that we come to a more realistic view here today. However, I think if you look at that Gardner curve there, we're sort of in the valley of death at the moment. And we need to be careful that the pendulum doesn't swing back. It was extremely to the unrealistic hype side. We need to be very careful that we're not getting too pessimistic. We need to be realistic, also in terms of what the messages that we send to the regulators, to the politicians, but also to the markets. That if you create the impression that by 28 that thing will fly, and then nothing happens, then people get frustrated, and then they say, okay, they turn away. It's not working. I told you, this is now the third hydrogen wave. It's never going to come, which is not. I mean, we're really in a fundamental change here. I think it's a fundamental view. If you believe that a transformation is a necessary, and B, that a transformation can only work with green molecules. If you look at the energy market, we can do a lot with electrons, but the majority or a large portion will always be molecule-based. And there, hydrogen is more or less the only alternative. So if you look at these, if you come to the conclusion we will have to transform, and molecules will play a very important role, clean or green, then there is no way around hydrogen. So this is very clear. And this is, I think, where we need to take that view, and maybe also take a longer view there, not looking at the immediate sort of wins. Also, there's a big difference. There's a lot of comparison, in Germany at least, to the gas market development, like 30 years ago. But there's a significant difference compared to 30 years back. First of all, gas was in the money from day one. Hydrogen is not. Secondly, you had off-takers beyond any credit doubt. If you had midstreamers in Europe, in Germany, that no bank would have ever even questioned. If you now come up with a 10-year, 15-year offtake agreement, even the highest credits will be questioned in terms of, is that offtake agreement really creditworthiness for 10, 15, 20 years? And that is a significant difference compared to 30 years back. That's also what makes it a little bit more challenging. And also then you have the missing links with the infrastructure. And so there are a lot of, let's say, hurdles that we need to get the puzzle together. We're approaching it, and the public and the private willingness is there. We just need to find effective ways of bringing them together and not losing sight here, but going step by step towards that direction.
It's something like changing the wheels of a car in movement. And this has to be done carefully to really keep it moving, and comes really to the objective at the end, to really change this. So what are the learnings now? You said that the second auction which is coming, and you're doing now a roadshow all over the world. What were the learnings from the first one that you changed now to the second one, just in a couple of...
The roadshow is already one of the learnings. In the first pilot auction, we had a very rigid, very formal process right from the beginning. Here we tried to do it a little bit different, to engage with interested bidders as early in the process as possible in a very transparent format. That is why we conducting this roadshow now, where we invite all interested parties, stakeholders along the value chain that want to participate in, or maybe want to participate in the process of the bid, to get engaged with HINTCO, with the team, to get familiarized with the documents, with the tender design, ask questions, really have a lot of clarifications. How does that work? What does HINTCO exactly mean? Why is HINTCO bankable? Why can't you shift tenors simply? Are you too stupid for that? Or are you ignorant? No, we're not. There are always reasons behind. Also, when you deal with public sort of background to a certain extent, there are always limitations on the public side, whether it's budget, whether it's regulatory. And I think it's important to make the stakeholders, the people, understand why things are the way they are, even if they seem to be unlogic and odd. There's always a reason for that, but I think it's important to make that reason, the background, understandable. Then it's easier, A, to digest, and also to explain that to your CEO, to your board, to your bankers. Why are they doing this way? And this is what we try to achieve with the roadshow. There are other elements. We now, for the first time, have a regional approach here. I think it's very important, especially now with the, let's say, global developments that we see in Europe, but also globally with the disruptions of, let's say, geopolitical landscape. I think the IEA just this week launched also a report about energy diversification value chains is so important, is really becoming a geopolitical play. It's not only about energy transformation, but also about, let's say, independence. And this is where we see a lot of, an opportunity also using the H2Global model, and HINTCO as a means to diversify value chains. For example, in the second H2Global auction now, we have what we call regional windows, where we have an auction only for Africa, only for the Middle East, Asia, Northern America, and one Latin America, Oceania. I think with that sort of you ensure that you will have, let's say, energy import connections and value chains being developed at least to
Globally,
4 different regions, and you have a diversification. And it's a little bit like in golf, where you have a handicap maybe, that maybe a region which has less sort of competitive circumstances compared to others can still participate and compete, because they're in different regional setups and lots, what we call them. So the prices might differ between these different lots. And irrespectively, this is sort of allowing or providing an equal playing field for bidders globally.
And developing a global market
Exactly.
at the end. No?
Exactly.
So as you said, you're traveling around the world, just already a couple of years, with the H2Global message, and also, so the H2, the hydrogen, the green hydrogen market in different countries of the world. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit, how do you see now Brazil in comparison to other countries, perhaps to South Africa, perhaps to some Asian countries or whatever? Because when we're here in Brazil, we always think that we have really good conditions, that we can provide green hydrogen, that we can to all the world, all over the world. But there is something perhaps. What is your vision currently about Brazil? Did that move? Was it better or was it worse in the past? And how Brazil is positioned right now on that thing?
I think maybe we start with a Latin American point of view. I think we probably share the view that when we looked at hydrogen back in 2020, there was a neighboring country, Chile, that was, I think, woke up a little bit earlier than the giant Brazil in terms of what is the opportunity of hydrogen. They had already preparing hydrogen strategy, things like that. And I think Brazil was really sort of felt, okay, we're really behind here. And my impression is that has actually changed in the last 4 years. So I think Brazil, especially the private sector, but also the public side, they've realized the big opportunity that hydrogen has for Brazil. Because I think Brazil, in various factors, has got a unique composition of elements here that makes it very attractive to become a producer of green hydrogen, off-taker for the local and regional transformation, but also to become a really global exporter of green hydrogen and its derivatives, due to simply the combination of wind and solar opportunities that you have, the existence of harbor infrastructure that is there, due to the fact that when we talk about regulatory requirements, for example, in Europe, there's the so-called RFNBO requirements, and there Brazil with the sort of already, I think, your grid is already more or less according to the RFNBO requirements. It's a green energy that you can take out of the grid, and a unique opportunity that most countries worldwide do not have. So there's various factors coming in where we believe, from what we see, that Brazil is extremely well positioned to grasp that opportunity. There are other regions as well. It's not only the Middle East, which obviously also got very comparative advantages, also solar and wind, cost of capital, big advantage there. But also I've been a couple of times to India in the last half a year. We also had the opening of the roadshow in India 2 weeks ago. Very impressive what we see there. Especially from a German point of view, I'm always surprised, Germany, Europe always believes we are pushing the energy transformation. When you look at the reality, the transformation is happening, where it's happening in China and it's happening in India, for example. China, they installed 360 gigawatts renewables last year, in 1 year. This is gigantic. Yes, they are still also, looking into fossil and into nuclear, same in India. But the majority of the capacity that is being installed is really happening in those two countries. And I see a lot of commitment also from large corporates in India to grasp that opportunity. And so I think it's really, there's a lot of opportunities also for Africa, for example. Challenge is a little bit different there when we talk about cost of capital, these elements. But we see with Fertiglobe in Egypt, there's ADNOC is sort of also in the background there. So sort of combination of Northern Africa and Middle East players. But we really see a reshuffling maybe also globally in terms of where there are opportunities for emerging economies, for developing economies, even at different scales. But I think Latin America, Brazil specifically, is very well positioned if they do the homework right. I would be surprised if Brazil wouldn't be one of the top 5 players here worldwide.
Great, let's continue to work to this. So, coming to an end, normally at the end, I'm doing with all my interviews a short, well, let me say a challenge, nothing very difficult, just throwing some keywords and asking about the opinion. So I'm using the same keywords for all interviews so that we can really compare this. So there are only 4 keywords which I would like to tell you, to tell us your thoughts about it. Yeah. So the first one, of course, it's climate change. What's your thoughts about climate change currently? What's coming to your mind when you are talking about climate change?
It's happening. I mean, I'm always puzzled that there are people out there that ignore climate change. That is something I really don't understand. I understand that you might have different opinions how to deal with it, but I have no understanding for the fact that people ignore the fact that the climate is changing. I mean, I'm a geologist and geographer, so for more than 300 million years, 400 million years, CO2 was absorbed from the atmosphere, sort of buried in the earth. Now, within a couple of decades, we are revealing that CO2 into the ocean, into the atmosphere again. That this is something this has consequences. I think, how can you doubt this? Yes, you can deal or have different opinions how to deal with it. Should you deal with it at all? Maybe it's nice if it's warmer. I could understand that. But doubting it or ignoring it is something I can't understand.
Okay, good. Second one, the just energy transition. What does it mean, just for you?
For me, it's a bit overhyped. I think let's be always pragmatic. Let's not think too much in theories. Let's think in real terms and just do it. Don't talk about it. This is for me a little bit sometimes too much talk, too little being done.
Too much good, doing too much good behind it. Let's just put the
let's get
train on the
let's get things going, and I think, as I said, also with hydrogen, there is a huge opportunity also for developing countries. And at H2Global, we look very much also into social and environmental aspects. Because, for example, I see huge risk if there is sort of in the tabloids, I don't know, hydrogen being exported from emerging countries, another exploitation, and people are being resettled. And that's what we also always tell also potential exporting countries, take this very seriously. This would be immense drawback for the entire industry if we have this in the tabloids that hydrogen is contributing to global inequality. I think it's a huge opportunity for emerging markets, and we need to grasp that opportunity.
It's a green and renewable opportunity. That's it's not exploring. It's a new one. But okay, the world of my grandchildren will be.
Oh,
you don't have so far. What?
If I would have one wish free, I would go back to or back to analog. So I'm really a little bit, I don't know, maybe every generation had that, but we're in a really complete transformation, I think, of the transformational change that is happening in the next decades is beyond at least my imagination. I have no idea what my grandchildren, in what kind of world, if they still live in their real world, looking outside, or if they're in a virtual world, I've got no idea. I like nature, I like being outdoors, and I hope that my grandchildren will still be enjoying outdoor and nature and, you know, real life, not only virtual life.
Okay, great. And the last one is Brazil in 2050. How do you see it?
How do I see it? As I said, I know a little bit about Brazil, not too much. We just talked about on the way here about the sleeping giant that is waking up. I think the opportunity is there. And I just hope that Brazil is not losing its spirit, because I really love the Brazilian way of life. And don't lose it, but use your potential.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So coming to the end, at the end, you still have the microphone and the cameras, whatever you still, if there are some messages that you would like to transmit to the audience, so feel free. If you have something to say, if we missed something to mention, something like that, so.
Just wondering, I mean, sometimes, as I said, sometimes you get opportunities, and sometimes just do things and try to do things. As I said, I would have never imagined that we do H2Global. I was scared in the beginning also to do that move, to take to jump over that water, I would say. But sometimes just doing it, maybe it works. So just always, especially in Germany, in Europe, we're always so pessimistic. We always think what could go wrong. Maybe you should think more about what could go right and what happens if it does go right. And there are always things you can move, and everybody can do things that changes things in life. So just try, go for it, and maybe it will work out.
Ok, thank you very much. Mais uma vez, obrigado, Timo, pela entrevista. Espero que vocês curtiram e pegaram algumas informações interessantes, importantes. Mais uma vez, eu acho que o Timo é uma das pessoas que realmente está criando um novo mundo através do H2Global. Foi muito importante ter ele conosco. E fica ligado no nosso programa. Depois nós vamos ter mais entrevistas importantes. Então, mais uma vez, muito obrigado, Timo.
Thanks for being here.
E até a próxima.